Hi folks, this short video is going to be a quick demonstration showing how to set up a small bathroom scene for rendering with SU Podium. Now, this is a user-submitted model, so I'm going to address their direct question first, and then I'm going to go through the rest of the process and set up the materials and lighting, and then just talk about a couple of simple modeling tips that I think will help this scene look a little bit better in the final image. So, if I go ahead and press the render button right now without making any changes, this is the result that we're going to get. I've actually already made a test render, so if I click show, we can see the rendered image is just way too dark. And in fact, that was the main question that the user was asking in support. They said, I have 4 can lights in my model, and each one of those lights has a spotlight associated with it. And so they were wondering why there's no artificial light in the render. And the answer to this is actually very simple. Alright, so I've zoomed in a little bit on these spotlights, and the solution in this case is actually to just select these lights, hit M to activate the move tool, and then I'm just going to move them down a little bit, maybe about 1.5 inches. And the reason I'm doing this is because if we look at the viewport representation of these spotlights, we've got this square and then this vertical line. And the one thing you need to know about spotlights is that the light actually originates at the top of this vertical line. So in this case, what was happening is that the spotlights were actually embedded in the ceiling, and so the light source was above the ceiling plane, and none of that light was making it into the room. So now that I've moved those two down, if I go back to scene 10 and create a render, this is what we end up getting. So I'll click show. I've already made that test render. And as you can see, those spotlights are much more effective now. We're getting plenty of light in this room, and things are starting to look as they should. There are still some problems though, so because the spotlight is down below the ceiling plane, all the light is shining down into the room and none of it is bouncing around inside of this light fixture. So if you look at this face in the center of the light, it's not actually glowing the way a recessed light normally would. So Podium browser light fixtures are actually set up pretty different than the way this one was constructed. Now, if I close this window and zoom in a little bit, I'm just going to show you a couple ways we can sort of make this light fixture look a little bit better. So the first thing I want to do, if you notice this blue tone on the ceiling, that means the face is reversed. So I'm going to click into that group, select the face, right click and say reverse faces, and now it turns white, and so we can tell we've got the correct face orientation. Now, if you've got an SU Podium license, the easiest way to deal with ceiling lighting is to just use something from Podium Browser. So I could double-click into this ceiling group, open Podium Browser, and then just download something that looks similar. So maybe this will work. It's a little bit bigger, but I can scale it. So when I click on the ceiling here, it's going to insert it directly into the group, and it's also going to automatically cut through the ceiling, right? So now we've got something that is constructed a little bit more like a can light would be in the real world. I can scale it down a little bit, and as you can see, it's already got an SU Podium Omni light up here inside the can. And when we render this, that light is going to bounce around on this reflective inner surface, and it's going to look like the light is glowing the way it does in the real world. So we're not going to get a sort of dull-looking flat surface the way we had before. Now, if you don't have Podium Browser, or if you just want to create a custom light fixture on your own, what you can do is intersect it with the ceiling plane. So let me show you how we would do that. I want to deselect this and select the other light fixture, and then I'm going to hit Control-X to cut that out of the model. I want to enter the ceiling group, and now we're going to go to Edit, Paste in Place. So now this light is inside the same group as the ceiling, and I'm going to right-click, go to Intersect Faces with Model. That's going to intersect the light fixture with the ceiling plane, so now I can select the center face and do whatever I want with it. So one option is to just delete this face entirely, press delete, and now we can see the inside of the can light. And if we wanted, we could take the spotlight and move it up into the can fixture, sort of similar to the way the Podium Browser light is constructed. Now, I'm not completely crazy about the way this recessed light was modeled. So another option we could go with is to leave that center face and just apply a light emitting material to it. So in order to do this, I just go up to the materials interface, click the plus to create a new material. Let's say LEM ceiling, no image texture, click OK. Then I'm going to grab the paint bucket, paint that on that center face, and we just need to give this LEM properties. So I've got LEM ceiling selected. Under LEM power, let's give it a power of 4. Click apply. I'm going to close that, and I'm going to get rid of this podium browser light fixture and then go back to scene 10. And now I'm just going to show you what this looks like with that LEM on that inner surface. So close that, click render, and I'll show you what that looks like. All right, here's the result of those changes, and as you can see, that light is looking quite a bit better. So here was the light before we intersected it with the ceiling and added the LEM, and then here it is again with an LEM on that center face so that it looks like it's glowing. So that improves the look of the light, but there is one problem I want to draw your attention to. So if we look at this render in a larger window and sort of take a close look at the intersection between the ceiling and the walls, you can see that there's this line of light along the intersection between those faces, and we call that a light leak. And what causes this is if you model your ceiling plane without any volume or thickness, you're going to get light leaks at that intersection between the walls and the ceiling. So let me show you what that looks like in the SketchUp model. So if we take a look outside, it looks like the user just took the SketchUp rectangle tool and placed a single SketchUp plane across this opening. But what we actually want to do is use a slab ceiling with a little bit of volume to it, and that's going to prevent any light from leaking through those edge intersections between the walls and the ceiling. So let me double click to open this group, hit P, and I'm just going to pull this face up a few inches, and then the last thing I want to do is extend these side faces to the edge of the walls. So pull that to here, right here. And then it looks like there's an extra edge on this side, so I'm just going to hit E, erase that edge, and once again, pull this face to the edge of the walls. And now that's going to eliminate those light leaks, and we're not going to see any light photons at the edge intersections between the ceiling and the walls. So let me go back to scene 10. There's one more camera trick I want to talk about. So as you can see, we're currently in perspective mode, but I know a lot of interior designers and architects like their images to be in 2-point perspective. Now, SketchUp does have a two-point perspective camera, but it actually doesn't work well with Podium. It can produce really unpredictable results, so a better option for interiors is to go to Extensions, SU Podium version 2.6, Tools, and just choose Reset Tilt, and that's going to zero out the tilt of the camera so that you have perfect vertical lines. The image is in 2-point perspective. Now I'm just going to adjust the camera view a little bit. I think right here is good. I'm going to right click and say Update Scene to save that new camera view in 2-point perspective. And that is an easy way to take care of perspective distortion in your images. All right, so the next step for us is to add some SU Podium material properties to this model, because if we take a look at the test render, there currently aren't any reflective surfaces in this model, and obviously this is supposed to be a mirror over the sinks. This countertop should probably be a little bit reflective, and also the floor and toilet and faucets. So we could use Podium Browser to add materials, but because this model is already fully textured, it'll actually be faster and easier to just add them manually. So I'm going to demonstrate that real quick. If you're a beginner to SU Podium, there is a much longer video on SU Podium material properties that explains everything you need to know. But in this video, I'm just going to do a quick demonstration. So I'm going to open the SU Podium material properties, grab this eyedropper tool, and we'll do the mirror first. So select that material, and I'm just going to give it a reflection value of about 85. Should work. Click apply, and then I am going to go into the edit tab, make sure we're not using an image texture, and just set this to like a relatively dark gray value. So that's a pretty standard setup for reflective chrome type mirrored surfaces in SU Podium. Click apply. Then I want to do the same thing to these faucets. So these faucets happen to have a fake reflection texture on them. And when we're working with SU Podium, we definitely don't want to use reflection textures. So again, I'm going to select that material. I'm going to turn off the corrugated texture, set this to a dark gray value, and then I'm just going to bump the reflection up to 90. I want these to be pretty much fully reflective. So click apply. All right, that takes care of the mirror and the faucets. And it looks like this actually had a different material on it. So I'm just going to do the same thing to this pole. Make this into chrome as well. 90, apply, undo that, make it dark, apply one more time. And I think we're pretty good on the metal surfaces, at least the ones that are in view of the camera angle that we chose. So the next thing is this countertop. I do want to put some reflection on it, but not too much. So I'm going to reopen the material properties dialog, color pick this material. And actually it occurs to me that this countertop seems to be sharing a material with the walls. So what we actually want to do is create a new material for the countertop because I don't want the walls to have any reflection. So let me close that. And over here I'll hit create material. Just call this countertop. White is actually just fine. I'm going to click OK. And now we need to paint this to the countertop. But something I noticed about this model is that this vanity was not modeled in separate pieces. So we need to just select the faces that we want and apply this material manually instead of triple clicking. So let me see. We want this here. Should just be one more face. And then I'm going to paint that on. Make sure that worked, and it did. And let's just give it a reflection value of about 9. I'm just going on past experience for that. We don't want it to be too reflective, but we just want it to have a little bit of subtle reflection on that countertop surface. So click apply. I think the next thing we can do is the wood. This, I want to have a subtle blurred reflection. So I'm going to go with 8. And I'm also going to check the blurred reflection checkbox. I don't want it to look like a polished mirror. We just want it to have some subtle reflection. So click apply. Now I need to close that group. And the last thing we need to do is the floor. So I think for the floor, we can put a bump depth of, let's try like 12 or something like that. And for reflection, I'm going to go with 12 as well. And once again, check blurred reflection. Click apply. And we're getting pretty close to finished as far as materials go. Maybe we can do the toilet. Oh, the toilet is also sharing a material with the walls, so maybe it's not worth it. Let me see if I can select this all in one go, and I actually can. So I'm gonna create a new material. Porcelain, I don't know if I spelled that right. And let's say 12. Click apply. And grab the paint bucket, paint it on. Triple click this and this. Paint that there. And I'm going to go back to scene 10 and see what we still haven't done. There is a subtle tile texture on the walls. It's not great, but it could probably use some bump depth. So let's give that a bump depth of like 8. And a reflection of 6, and we'll say blurred reflection, apply. And I think that's just about gonna do it. Let me click apply and close. And we could probably make a test render at this point. So let me quickly show you what render settings I have selected, and then I'll make a quick test. So under the preset, I'm using the interior default preset. I'm just rendering at viewport resolution for now, which means it's rendering at the exact same size as this viewport window. Under the environment tab, I just have Podium Physical Sky 1 selected. I bumped up the exposure a little bit, but if we needed it to be brighter, we could use the interior bright default preset, and we'll probably decide later whether we need that. I don't have soft omni checked because right now there are no omni lights in the room, but if I was using omni lights, it would be a good idea to check this because that just makes the shadows a little bit softer and more natural looking. It takes a little bit longer to render, but in my opinion, it's very much worth it. I'm going to uncheck it though because I just have spotlights right now. Save and render. All right, that test took 1 minute and 9 seconds, and if I click show, it's looking pretty good. All of those material settings are looking pretty decent. The mirror looks like a mirror. These faucets are now reflecting light. We've got some subtle reflections on the countertops. There are some things I would critique. Right now, a lot of the edges are looking kind of sharp, and they could possibly be improved by using the Fredo Roundcorner plugin to add a slight bevel on some of these edges. And the second major thing is that we don't have any definition on these cabinets across from the vanity. And actually the same thing is happening down on the cabinets below here. So let me show you why. I'm going to close these windows, and if we take a look inside this cabinet group, you can see the user divided this face into 4 different cabinet sections, but there aren't actually any gaps between the cabinets. Now, SU Podium completely ignores SketchUp lines. The light can only interact with SketchUp geometry or faces. So in order for these cabinets to show up, there needs to be a slight gap between them, just like there would be in the real world. So to fix this quickly, what we can do is grab the offset tool and offset this face by maybe about 2 millimeters. 1 or 2 millimeters is usually good. I'll just repeat that on all 4 surfaces. And then what we can do is use the push-pull to push back these center sections. So grab that and push it back. Double click to repeat on each of these. And now these cabinets should show up in the SU Podium render. I do need to go ahead and repeat this process on the cabinets over here, and then also the cabinets below the sink. So I'm going to stop that recording and do that while the camera is not running, and then I'll continue from there. All right, so I finished indenting those cabinets on the right side and did the same thing to the cabinets beneath the sink. Created a quick test render, and this was the result. So that's a big improvement. We can see the outlines of the cabinets now, but I thought this image was a little bit too dark. So what I did was switch to the interior bright default preset and then reset both the intensity and exposure values to 50/50, and then created a second test render. And this was the result. So I think the lighting in this definitely looks better. We could go ahead and tweak certain things from here. Like if we thought these spotlights were too bright or too dark, we could play around with the values. Actually, I did change the near one to 0.75 instead of 1. And one other thing I did was made the floor a little bit more reflective. So I changed that from like 18 to 23. And that actually is visible in the render. You can sort of see the faint reflection of this shower curtain down here on the floor. It's a subtle touch, but I think the floor does look a little bit better with a bit more reflection on it. So there was one more thing I wanted to show you dealing with modeling and geometry. I said earlier that I thought some of the edges in this scene seemed a little bit too sharp. There's a great tool called Fredo Roundcorner that lets you add a slightly rounded edge or a bevel to any edge in your SketchUp model. So I decided that the sinks and countertops would look better if we put a bevel on them. So let me show you how to do that. This plugin is available through Sketchucation or in the extension warehouse. The developer is Fredo and the plugin's called Roundcorner. So I'm gonna select the faces on the inside of the sink here. And any edges bordering this sink are going to be part of our selection for the Roundcorner plugin. We need one more right here. All right, I'm going to activate Roundcorner by pressing this button. And what we need to do is choose an offset and a number of segments. So I want the radius on these sink edges to be 3 millimeters. And I'm going to use 3 segments. And now if I click off, it's going to take a second to calculate those bevels. And it might actually place a face on top of these sinks, which we can just select and delete, select and delete. And now you can see exactly what that did to these sinks. We now have a rounded or beveled edge on these sinks, and it really does look a lot more like the way a sink would be constructed, because edges in the real world tend not to be 100% sharp, especially in a bathroom on a sink. It just looks a little bit better and catches highlights and interacts with light a little bit nicer when you have a bevel on those edges. I'm going to do that on this one as well. I might actually go up to 4 millimeters on this one. We'll stick with 3 segments, bevel that. I think that looks pretty good. And the last one I'll do to keep this short is this upper and lower face on this wood. We don't want a wide bevel on that one. I'm gonna go down to 2 millimeters, and we'll just use 2 segments. Click off, and you can see exactly what that did. So that's a really nice trick. That's a great plugin for SketchUp. I recommend everybody download it that's doing this sort of modeling, because it really can enhance the way that these models interact with light in a render. So let me go back to scene 10, create one more test render, and then we're probably going to be wrapping up this video pretty soon. All right, that test render finished, and here's the result. Now, if we look at it in a slightly larger window, you can definitely see how beveling those edges around the sinks and this edge of the countertop enhances the edge and makes it interact with the light a little bit better. We can sort of see this light highlight all along this edge, and definitely right here you can see how that rounded edge makes the result a little bit subtler and more realistic looking. All right, I think that's going to be a pretty good stopping point. This image looks pretty nice. The next thing to do, if you wanted to refine this image even further, would be to switch to the interior high preset instead of default. So the high presets just add an overall higher level of quality and refinement to the lighting and the edges. It does take 2 to 3 times longer, but it's usually worth it to switch to those high presets for your finished image. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the video there. Hope you all learned something and picked up a few new tips that you can apply to your own projects, and I will see you in the next video. All right, thanks.